For those of you who don't know me, and the good news is many of the people in the room I actually do know, I'm Barry Mills. I'm the Deputy Chancellor who started here in the middle of March, and I'm delighted to be here and to welcome you all to today's much anticipated town hall. I have to say, as I've traveled around campus, the number of people who have told me how excited they are for a variety of reasons about this town hall is inspiring. I hope we don't let you down. I have been here at UMass for about, since the middle of March. And I came as Chancellor Motley's partner because after speaking with him and meeting with him, he and I understood that the mission that he feels so passionately about is a mission that actually sings to me. And so I did flunk retirement and decided that because of that mission, this was the place for me to come and to work with him to help this university be everything that it can be. Having worked for a short while with Chancellor Motley, but actually having seen what he has led this university to accomplish over these last 10 years, I stand on the shoulders of a pretty tall guy in many, many, many respects. Every leader who takes on a position stands on the shoulders of the people who came before. And every person who takes on these roles does it in a way that is centrally related to good faith and making judgments in the best interest of the institution. I am new to UMass Boston, and there are people here who have been here a very long time, and I've met many of you. But in looking at the history of this institution and speaking to you, I understand what this place, this wonderful institution was 25 and 30 and 10 years ago. And if one thinks back just 10 years ago and thinks about where this university was and where it is today, one can't help but have huge admiration for the kind of leadership and entrepreneurial spirit and mission that Chancellor Motley brought and brings to this place. And so it is in the spirit of that mission that brought me here to try to help him and all of you allow this university to really reach its aspirations. I have enormous admiration and respect for what he's accomplished, and I hope that each of you will find Chancellor Motley over these next few weeks and congratulate him and thank him for all that he's done, and that we'll be able to celebrate him appropriately to make sure he understands how much this institution owes to him and is grateful to him for him putting his life and heart and soul into the place. Now, I am very new, and I come from a lot of different environments. Some people say to me, well, you lived in Maine, so how do you know what it's like to be in an urban place? Well, I lived in New York City for 25 years. So I do understand urban. And I did lead an institution that is very different from this institution. And yet, given that leadership experience, plus experience that I've had in a variety of other parts of my life, plus having spent time in an ed school talking about leadership and understanding what it means to do research and scholarship at the highest levels like all of you do, I understand, or I'm at least learning, what this institution is about. So over these last number of weeks, I've been doing a lot of learning and a lot of listening. And it is gratifying to look out into this crowd and to see how many faces I actually know, and to recognize that I've been in more than one meeting with many of you, and to understand that we have had conversations that have had many common themes. These common themes go to the words respect, they go to the words transparency, and they go to the words of working together to achieve the mission of this great university. I am only one guy, and alone I can't achieve all that you expect or want this place to achieve. In fact, the leader of an academic institution, in many ways, the job is about allowing you to succeed and making sure the administrators stay out of your way to allow you to make that happen. Our job, in so many ways, is to enable you to be excellent and to help you think about ways that you can be excellent and work together to make the university really sing. So I've heard many, many, many perspectives. And everyone focuses on the financial problems when we read in the newspaper what's written about us. But the themes that have resonated most strongly with me are the themes about respect and about transparency and about communication and about listening. And so I can talk about it a lot. But in fact, words don't really matter here. It's all about action. And so I hope and expect that over my time here working with you, that we will find ways to respect each other, to work together, to communicate, to be transparent. For those of you who have spent any time with me, I am dangerously candid. I hope I can control myself today in this large group. And I say what's on my mind. Sometimes I think out loud and often don't really have a view that's really fully formed, but I actually work with you to try to understand where we ought to go. So it's about communication, it's about respect, it's about working together. It's about finding that shared vision and then working together to make it happen. And so I feel accountable. I feel accountable every day when I come here. And I hope that each of you feel accountable to do the very best that you can do in that spirit. This is a great university. I travel around Boston in a variety of circumstances, and I can't tell you the number of people who have come up to me and said, what a fantastic thing it is that you've come and joined this university, because this is the jewel of Boston. And the opportunity to work here in this jewel, creating opportunity for the people of this city and state, is what public education is all about. I want to be clear. There is no university in Massachusetts that does what we do. There is no university in Massachusetts that serves the students that we serve at scale, makes it affordable for them to get a great education, allows faculty to do sophisticated research, staff to have a secure life, and we do it at scale. And that's vitally important to remember. And so this university is recognized by folks around the Commonwealth as a place that must succeed and should succeed. And so our job, our collective job, is to put this place in a position that it can and will, and to put this place in a position where people understand the level of excellence that goes on here. It is very well known that we serve an important mission in the service that we provide and the education that we provide to the young people of this state. And people understand the access and opportunity. But what they don't understand as well as they should is the level of excellence of the research and scholarship that goes on here. So this public research university is very important. And so it's important for us to make sure that our message is understood and supported. But as I say, we need to work together on that promise. So I've spoken to many of you, and we have gotten knocked around in the press pretty vigorously. I'm here to say to you that I stand tall when I talk about UMass Boston, and I expect that you will too. This is a place to be proud of. what you have achieved here and we will achieve is truly amazing. And so, despite the fact that we seem to be the flavor of the day in the Boston Globe, this is a remarkable place. And it is unfortunate that good news stories actually don't make the press. And there are so many good news stories here. And so I'm not down because of the publicity we've gotten. In fact, all publicity in some ways is good publicity. A lot more people know about UMass Boston today than might have 6 or 8 weeks ago, although I wish we hadn't gotten it. And so I really do hope that people will stay optimistic. By nature, I'm an optimistic guy. And I hope that optimism flows through to all of you. I am not, however, a Pollyanna. And so together we will work in open and respectful ways to make this place really be what it should be. So on the financial issues, we're going to take you through a presentation that I hope will level the playing field. The design here is to level the playing field so that you will understand why we're in the situation that we're in and begin to help us think about how we move forward. Some of the issues that we have are legacy issues. And by that, I mean these are issues which this campus was endowed with in the early 70s. Unfortunately, that endowment is negative rather than positive in the way that people think about endowments. But it is definitely a legacy that we've been endowed with. And somehow, we've been asked to take on the responsibility for that endowment, which is in some respects appropriate, but as many of you have noted to me, in so many other respects, not appropriate. I take my responsibility, this Save UMB, very seriously. And so we have these legacy issues, but we also have other issues that have arisen out of rapid growth, lots of expansion, and challenges and opportunities that maybe we haven't stepped up to as vigorously as we might, that have put us somewhat in the position that we're in. So what we're going to do today is we're going to take you through some presentations. We're not going to filibuster you, but we're going to take you through some presentations, because this moment is both an opportunity for you to talk to us, but for us to educate you, so that people will understand what's the issue. I have walked around this place and I've got about a 7-minute spiel where I can explain to you how we got into the financial place we're in. And people say to me, well, no one's ever done that for us before. So we're going to try to do it for you in 10 minutes and take you through so that you will understand it. There are going to be some concepts that are going to be, depending on what your discipline is, will be strange to you. But we aren't disappearing. This is only the first of many town halls. So you can have conversations with us about a lot of that. So we're going to take you through the financial side. Then we're going to take you through the construction side. And then we're going to take you through some good news on enrollment. I'm going to talk to you about all that's been happening in the academic program that has raised tensions higher than maybe they should be raised, but there's not been the best communication, so we need to pierce that veil also. And so I invite Kathleen up, Kathleen Kurlis, who's the new CFO here at the university. She'll take you through the financial piece. Our request is you let us get through the financial piece, get through the presentation, and then we will stay as long as you want to stay to answer whatever questions you have or whatever comments you may be interested in making. You're up.
Thank you, Mary. Everybody hear me okay? All right, here we go. All right, that's better. So like Mary, I'm very happy to be here. I've started just at the beginning of April, so a little bit over a month. It's nice to see many familiar faces out here. I've been going around the university meeting people, and I look forward to meeting with many of you over the next several months. So today, what we've got in store is we've got the introduction that we just had from Deputy Chancellor Mills. I'm going to walk through the current university financial situation, both the current fiscal year and fiscal 17, as well as a preview of where we are with fiscal 18. I'll talk about capital projects a little bit, and then status of enrollment, the course section planning, and a few of the next steps that we'll be looking at over the next few weeks. So the fiscal 17 operating budget, just as to just recap about an operating budget, just since we all have a lot of different backgrounds. The operating budget is the budget that the university has to conduct its operations throughout the year. It includes things like tuition and fees that our students pay. It includes the state appropriation. State funds about a quarter of what the resources are for the university. Grants and contracts. Auxiliary revenue, items like the bookstore and in-campus dining. And then federal aid, which supports our students in terms of financial aid programs, as well as we also get federal grants from the federal government too. Expenditures that are part of the operating budget, the biggest, salary and fringe benefits to pay for the employees of the university. We also have utilities that keep the lights on and the heat on in all of our buildings. Supplies and equipment that are needed in instruction and in research and in the support of the mission of UMass. And then last but not least, depreciation and interest, which we'll spend a little bit of time talking about this afternoon as well. So for this slide, for the last 4 years, this shows a little bit about the financial results of the university. So you'll see our enrollment has increased over time, right? We went from 16,277 up through over 17,000 with a little bit of a dip. We're moving up here, a little bit of dip projected for fiscal 17. With the revenue, our revenues have grown. We've grown our programs. Our tuition has increased for our students, unfortunately, a little bit over time. And our expenses also have grown as well. Operating margin, I'll spend time talking about separately with the slides. Operating margin is a measure of financial health of an institution. It's something that the system as a whole looks at. So a little bit, just give you a little bit of background so you can understand it. So if you hear it being talked about, you'll be like, oh, okay, I understand what this means in terms of both dollars and percentage. Faculty and staff trends. So as we've grown as an institution, our staff has increased. So you'll see starting back in fiscal 14, we're a little bit over 1,800 employees. Today we're over 2,000. This is as of November in each of these fiscal years. This is full-time employees here. For expense and enrollment growth, the important thing to talk about with here is you'll see those little red dots. That's how where our enrollment has grown over the past few years. So you'll see, we've gone up. We went up 3% in fiscal 15, 2% in 16, and so on. But you'll see our compensation. That's money that we pay for our faculty and staff has grown at a much higher percentage, 7%, 9% over the past few years. So this has created a structural imbalance within the budget that we'll need to be looking at. Our non-compensation costs, these will be things non-personnel, your utilities, your supplies, your equipment, but that's grown a little bit. We've cut back a lot on that this year. And then last but not least, capital-related costs, so interest for our debt service, costs associated with capital construction that impact the operating budget are here. All right. So every year, the university takes its budget to the Board of Trustees. And so it's one of the campuses of the overall UMass system. Our budget goes in and is rolled up into the overall system budget. Last July, this is the budget that went in for our campus. And so it had headcount of 17,000 students. Revenue of just over $430 million. Expenses were $429, which would do an operating margin of $2.3 million. However, in order to reach this level, there were $25.8 million of reductions that would need to be done to get to these targets. So the university, working with the overall system, they didn't want to have us have a budget deficit of $23 million. They wanted to say, you university need to work to put some reductions in place over time. We realize this is going to take you a little bit of time. So the university came forward with some plans to implement reductions so that they could, this budget here could be achieved. So work took place. Many of you have been involved with this over the years. It's been really hard, difficult work. And I would take this time to acknowledge, the work that everybody and the sacrifice everybody's made in this room, because it's impacted virtually every area of the university, and it's been very difficult. So we've done base budget reductions. These are within your own areas in the university, cuts that have been made to different discretionary accounts just to reduce the overall amount of resources that we needed to spend. There's a combination. The solution was not only reduction, but also increase in revenue too. To both have been a strategy to reduce the gap. So the online and summer courses, the CAPS classes, the fees went up this summer. So that was $3.6 million. We did have less undergraduate students this fall, past fall. That did result in a lower need for financial aid. It wasn't that our students received less financial aid, but we had less students. So we didn't need to use as much money for financial aid, and so that created some savings. Working with the IT department, we deferred some IT investments. Those can't be deferred forever, but they were able to be deferred in the short term. So there's some savings there that was recognized. Our campus services area worked hard and tirelessly with faculty, staff, and students alike to really look at the shuttle service, get the shuttle service lined up, make some adjustments there. We've done some utility savings projects to reduce costs. We've also looked at the budget. When we get into construction projects, sometimes there's costs that we run on the operating side that could be capitalized and put in as the part of the project, and that means it just gets added to the project cost and eventually will get depreciated once the project comes online. So here we did, with the parking lot at Bayside and with some of the public safety costs that you see with the officers out directing traffic every day for the projects, we've capitalized those costs, removing them from the operating budget and putting them off the budget and onto being capitalized. There's been a hiring freeze. This has impacted every area of the college as well, right? If people leave, retire, take other opportunities, really not been able to replace many of those positions. So we've saved $750,000 there. Taking a look at graduate stipends and some of the waivers in the graduate programs. Our NUPs did a voluntary furlough program that resulted in close to $250,000 of savings for the university. We've had some other revenue come in higher than projected, so that's helped us out a little bit. And then the state, just a word on the state, one of the reasons why our budget was adopted in July last year is normally they would do it in June, but the state didn't get around to passing the budget, if you remember, last summer till after the fiscal year started. And when they did, they funded higher ed at a lower rate than any of the versions of the budget. The governor's version, the House version, the Senate version was lower than all of that. So our share of that lower amount was $700,000. So that was not something that we had anticipated in the budget planning process last year. I mean, usually it's a pretty safe bet to say that one of those versions will get adopted, but last year that didn't happen. We did wind up with an additional $700,000 cut that we had to build into our plan. All right. So I wanted to just spend a little bit of time talking about operating margin, because this is a concept that is used sometimes to talk about the financial health of the university. So basically what it does is it's an indicator to talk about how much revenue is left over after we pay all of our operating expenses, and then that money can be returned for investment in the university. If we were a private company, that would be called profit, and that would be something the shareholders are looking for. As a nonprofit university, we were going to look to invest that money back into our mission and back to our students, back to our faculty and staff. So normally you would want to see a positive operating margin, and we've had a little bit of a challenge here the last 3 years. We're at minus 0.8% in fiscal 15, 1.4 in 16, and this year we're projected to be negative 1.6. So that's a challenge for us, because we really need to be able to have a positive operating margin. So depreciation, debt-related expenses. Funding for the university, we've got the operating budget that supports our operations, and then we have a capital budget that supports our capital construction, our projects, our buildings, buildings. And I'll talk a little bit about that later on here. But in terms of the construction projects, there is an intersection between the capital budget and the operating budget. And part of it really lies in depreciation and debt-related expenses. So depreciation, this is an accounting concept. I'm a CPA by background, so this is the kind of stuff I got to study in school back in the day. This depreciation, basically the idea with it is you have a value for your asset, and you're going to take a portion of that over time as an expense, and that will allow you to be able to replenish your asset, have money to replenish your assets going forward. It's accounting transaction. It's not a cash transaction. The debt, on the other hand, is cash. This is cash out the door. Interest, expense, and principal payments. When we go to the market and we borrow money to fund our building costs, we're going to pay that back to the lenders in the form of interest and principal. So when we look at the operating budget, every year we build into the budget depreciation costs and interest expense. So when we look at the operating budget, these are two things that we include in it. Principal payments, on the other hand, are not. Those are what's considered to be a balance sheet item. So those you wouldn't see in your operating budget, but the university still needs to have cash available to pay for those costs so that the investors can be repaid. So you'll see here with depreciation, as some of our new buildings are coming online, you'll start to see the cost creep up because we've invested in our campus and we now have new assets on the books that will be depreciated. So with University Hall, the building we're standing in here right now, coming online, in the ISC, we see depreciation increasing over the last few years. Interest expense, that also, when we go to the market and we borrow money, when the project's being constructed, that interest expense doesn't impact the operating budget. We do what's called capitalize the interest. It goes back to be added to the cost of the project. Once the project's done, the building's open, we've had the opening ceremony and everything's being used, then it becomes an asset and we start depreciating it, we start expensing the interest. So the interest becomes part of our operating costs. And then we also have the principal payments that we need to do. So ideally, you'd like to have your depreciation be able to cover this, so you'll have cash, sufficient cash to pay for it. We'll see a little bit when we talk about our reserves, how that's worked out for us. But these are parts of our budget that we have that it is within the whole UMass system. It is best practice in higher education, but sometimes it is something that people say, well, explain that to me again. I'm not familiar with it. Unrestricted reserves. So this is an area of the college. Once we get done paying for operating budget, if there's resources that are left over, it will go into the reserve account. So back in fiscal 14, the university was sitting with $88 million unrestricted reserves. That's gone down $48 million between fiscal 14 and fiscal 16. That's a significant decline. That's pretty unusual. You normally wouldn't see that for an institution. So how did that happen? We've had operating deficits during the past few years. We've had a $1.2 million operating deficit. We've also had deficits in fiscal 16, and we're projecting a $7 million deficit for this year. University Hall, there was a cost, some capital construction costs that wound up being paid out of reserves, direct out of reserves, $13 million in fiscal 16. And then the last major part of expenses that have hit reserves is the capitalized interest and debt payments. And so this area, when the university has a practice through its building authority to borrow money in advance of the construction projects. So we'll go out to the market and borrow money well in advance of when we're going to start construction, partly to take advantage of the favorable interest rates that have been out there in the past few years, and also to match up some of the cash flow with the construction schedules and when the building authority thinks cash might be needed for the projects. So while that cash is sitting in the bank, the assets aren't built yet. So there's no depreciation on them. The interest that's being paid would be being considered part of the construction cost, okay? So when we borrow the money, we have to start paying the money back. We have to start paying back the principal, start paying back the interest. What we saw from the previous slides, principal never shows up in your operating budget. And interest doesn't show up, isn't going to show up either. So when we ran the deficits here, when we got done, when we got done with the deficit, we still had the amount of money that we had to pay back to the borrowers and principal interest was above and beyond what had been planned for in the operating budget with the interest. So we have some costs here, 13 million, 14 million, and another 10 million this year. This is significant. So the good news is the assets are coming online. We're finishing up these projects. Our depreciation increases. That causes us a little bit of stress on the operating budget, but it gets rid of this problem. We won't be having in the reserves the issue of capitalized interest hitting the reserve account. So fiscal 18. All right, the $30 million deficit. We all heard about this in the newspaper, right? Everybody's heard about the Boston Globe. Well, the $30 million UMass deficit. So where did that come from? Originally, it came from, there's a 5-year projection that we do with as part of the university system, where there was a number with $30 million. So that's how it got out into the press. But there's been a little bit of adjustment over time. So if we look at that where it is today, our revenues for next year are planned at $27.8 million. This does include, we are looking to have a 2% increase in in-state tuition for our undergraduates, and then 3% for out-of-state and for our graduate programs. The operating budget, this would be rolling the current, if we have the current operations today, as they existed at the end of fiscal 16, that would be your operating costs. Our depreciation that we're expecting based on our projects would get us a subtotal of $457 million, which gives us we're still about $29 million here. So this is a really large deficit that we'll all be working on, and much work has been done to already work to reduce this. All right, so if we looked at that, so as there's been work underway to begin to prepare the fiscal 18 budget, there's going to be more work to come. But if we look at that $29 million that existed, one thing to note for next year is we do have some additional costs that are coming online. So even if we kept things the way they were, we've got some new activities coming on board. We've got the residential community starting up, so that'll be being added to the cost. We've got some new buildings that have come online that we have utility costs for that haven't been fully added into the operating budget. And then tuition and fee increases. Here, we're expecting additional revenue for tuition and fees from two sources. One is those costs that we put into place this year with the online courses and the summer courses. That'll roll over into next year, which wasn't part of when the original planning was being done, as well as the additional revenue that would come from the tuition increases for the upcoming year. So this basically where we stand today. We're looking at about a $23 million deficit in terms of closing the gap on where we will. So later on in the presentation at the end, we'll talk about some of the next steps that we'll be looking to do to help begin to reduce this. So that sort of sums up the operating budget a little bit in terms of where we've been, where we currently are. On the capital side, we should take a minute to pause and celebrate about all the capital projects that have been done. There's been a lot of investment in the campus over the last several years. We've expanded, and we've got some great new facilities for our faculty and staff and our students. We've got the Integrated Sciences Complex, $179 million. University Hall here, $137. We've put on a new roof at the library. We've put parking lots over at the Bayside and demoed some of the buildings over there. We've got investments in the dock over here in the ocean. The Harbor Walk's been improved in Monin Park for our baseball team. It has been invested. So $339 million worth of investments, something to celebrate. It's really a big investment here. We also have a number of projects under construction. We've got the utility corridor and roadway relocation project. This project has been a challenge for us all. Affects us getting around on campus, and the costs have also increased a lot. We've added some scope to this over time. So originally when this project was planned, there was no residence halls. The ISC, things have been added to it. So we've got that project budget currently at $260 million. We also have the residence hall. That's being funded as P3 project with Capstone as our partner. So that doesn't come out of our debt service, but we have a partner who's going to be working with us to help build the residence halls and open them in the fall 2018. We've got the university dining that we're paying as part of the residence hall. The renovations to our existing academic buildings. So this is some of the renovations for Wheatley McCormick that will be, this is in the process of being planned and will be upcoming. We've got a parking garage that we're going to build. This originally was planned as a P3 project, which would have took it off all of our debt service. Looks like probably now that's not going to be able to be fully as a P3 project, primarily because it's an infrastructure investment to us here at the university. We're going to use it, and we're going to be using it all the time. It's not like we're in downtown Boston, and there's other third parties who would come in and pay for parking. So we're going to be working through that, but the parking garage is underway. It's under construction. I encourage you to keep your eyes and ears out for some of the construction information that's coming out of the construction team, because they keep us all informed about what's going on with the projects. We've also got a couple of smaller projects here. We've got over by the athletic facility. We've got the roof project and the wall that's being constructed over there. We've got an elevator replacement project that I think any of us who've been in these elevators will appreciate getting those refurbished. And then there's a few payments that are still due on University Hall where we're working through with the contractors to do some of the final, pay for some of the final work that was done. All right, so as I was talking before about the interest and the principal payments. So here we go. We've got $205 million that we've gone to the market, that we've borrowed. It's sitting in the bank for the university to use to pay for payments on its construction projects. We also have had the state do some investment on our campus. So currently they did fund $75 million for the utility corridor project. They've already paid 50 of it. They've got another 25 that's due. We're expecting that. So that is coming through as part of the project there. And they've also are funding a little bit of the project over at the athletic center. So we've got $232 million available for our projects. And here are all the projects that are being funded. So the ones I was talking about: utility corridor, parking garage, the rehab, University Hall, the athletic building, and the elevator replacements. So those are all in place and proceeding. You can see construction on them. There's information out and about where they are. The next project we've got is the substructure. We read a lot about this in the newspaper too, right? So the project with this is currently, you'll hear this is a $155 million project. Well, that 155 doesn't include anything for the Science Center, because the Science Center is actually General Academic Building 2 here, which is $100 million, which you see as an unfunded project. So when we look to do what is it going to cost for the substructure, we do also need to build into the fact that there are costs associated with relocating our science building. And so this is a range. It could be 155 to 230. We're working on some design documents now. So we'll see what this price tag is, but it definitely is going to be above $155 million for sure. We're happy the Commonwealth has committed $77.5 million towards this project as part of its budget for next year. So that will begin to fund this project. But one of the things that we'll be working on is we really need a fully funded plan to be able to start, be in place before construction proceeds. So we can't move anybody out of anywhere or get things ready to be demolished. We have a funding plan. It's really going to make sure that once we start this project, we're going to be able to take it to completion and minimize the disruption on the campus for our students and for our faculty and staff. So this is an active project. It's been a very public project, something that we're working on finding some solutions for. And then there's a number of projects just to put out there. These are projects you've heard about. You're like, well, what's going on with these ones? These ones we don't have any funding for. So after we get done using all the money that's been borrowed to pay for the other project, these are some of the ones that are in the pipeline that at this point we're not going to be able to proceed with, at least right now as the funding exists, without going back to the market or being able to figure out where our debt limits are. So we've got the General Academic Building 2. There's authorization in the bond bill for it, but there's no cash for it right now. So that's a project that's currently doesn't have funding to proceed. The energy producing facility, this is another important project for us, right? We need it for the dorms. We need it to look at some of to support the ongoing energy needs on campus. We're going to be looking at some options on how we do ensure that we have adequate energy for the campus, but for right now, we're not going to be able to put a shovel in the ground for the energy producing project. The public safety and athletic facility, this was originally part of the parking garage project. So that project wound up being split into 2 parts. So the parking garage does have funding, that is proceeding. This, we're still looking to figure out how this will be funded with public safety and the athletics. The Healy Library and the Clark Athletic Center, there's no fire suppression systems in those buildings. So yeah, not such a funny thing. Something that we really do need to work on to get. And then last but not least, the parking garage. You may be aware there's a pedestrian bridge that was planned as part of the parking garage. So right now, there isn't any funding for that. We'd be looking at some other solutions on how people can safely be able to cross the road between the parking garage and the rest of our campus. So that's pretty much where our capital budget stands. I'm going to turn this over now to Lisa Johnson to talk a little bit about our enrollment, because we have some very good news there. And then we will talk about some of the next steps for the cap. All right.
Hello, everybody. First of all, I want to say that talking about enrollments is talking about the work of everybody on this campus, and so I'm very proud to be able to show where we are. I'm going to give you a little snapshot, and this is just our freshman numbers. And the reason I'm only focusing on freshmen right now, this is new freshmen, is because we're still in the process of recruiting our transfer students, and those deadlines don't come until the middle of June. So if you look at these bar charts, you can see this is a comparison of where we are compared to last year at this time. This was done as of May 5th. So you can see we are up 5% in new freshman applications, up 19% in admits, and up 28% in deposits. If you look at those numbers, that's 350 more freshman deposits than we had last year at this time. This is a breakdown in that freshman pool. And you can see that we're up 22% in in-state domestic students, up 45% in our out-of-state domestic students, and up 65% in our international numbers. Now, what is the goal? The goal for freshmen is 1,680, and this is how we would break it down, what we're looking for. 1,330 in-state domestic students, 250 international, and 100 out-of-state. But if you remember the numbers I just showed you, we're already at 1,263 in-state. We're already at 158 international, and we're over and out of state. We're at 183. Now, for those of you that know our campus very well, you know that we have a large DSP, Directions and Student Potential program. Those students don't enter into these numbers until a little later. We're anticipating 250 of them. We also have all of our international partnerships, and those numbers come through mostly in June and July. And some of our bigger partners, Maya and Navitas, we're expecting between those two around 225 international students from those two. So the good news is we are expecting to exceed our freshman goal for this fall, and we're all really happy about that because you all know we've had some rocky roads in the press, and so we're proud of the fact that we've all come together for this. Now, before we start course selection, I just want to do one thing. I would love to have every single person in this room that did something to help us bring in those freshman numbers, just stand up. Stand up if you did anything to help bring in those freshman numbers.
Oh, I did.
Anything.
I did.
All right?
Come on.
If you look around here,
Oh, I did, yeah.
you can see my point. When we work together and we work hard, we can do amazing things. This is an amazing campus. It's a great community to bring new students to. And so let's keep it up. Let's yield the rest of this class, and let's make sure that we have those students for this fall. Thank you. And now I'm going to introduce Emily McDermott, who's going to talk about our course selection planning. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the course section planning process we've been going through in the provost's office with the deans and the chairs of departments. This is a description of what we've done a little bit. Basically, it's amazing to me sometimes the things that I read that we're doing, because they seem so at odds with what I thought we were doing. But what we are doing right now, we have gone through a long process, and a pretty careful process, I'd say, consulting among chairs and deans and the provost's office in order to try to trim back some of the courses that were already scheduled into the fall 2017 schedule. Our basic reason for doing this is A, we can save money, and B, we can make progress on a strategic goal that's built into our strategic plan of increasing the student-faculty ratio from 16:1, where it presently is, to 18:1, which puts us in sync with the other campuses of UMass. So we've been pointed to by the President's Office as an outlier in our student-faculty ratio because we're lower than the other campuses. And we have a goal of showing that we can get to 18:1, be economical while we do it, and not go against our academic mission in doing that. So basically, in order to get towards this goal for this year, we've talked to the deans, we've talked to the chairs, and we came up with 86 sections that were originally in the schedule for fall 17. And we took them out of the schedule. I call it trimming. We took them out of the schedule before the schedule opened to students for registration purposes. So any sections that are now in the schedule and students are registering for are going to be there still next fall. We plan no further cancellations of courses at this point, except through the normal process we always follow of canceling under-enrolled classes as summer passes when we see there are certain classes that just don't get enough students in to run. So we're basically saying we've done the process right now. It's not coming. So I noted on the yellow sheet that was passed out, the fourth bullet says, inform the community of the full extent of any cutbacks or course cancellations. I just did, okay? We have no further cutbacks to course cancellation or course cancellations projected for the fall semester. If you're in a course now, you should be in a course in the fall, unless you're the only person in the course, in which case it will get canceled. So 86 sections sounds like a lot, perhaps sounds like a lot to you. To put that in perspective, we teach approximately 1,800 sections per semester. So we're taking 86 out of 1,800 sections out of the schedule. We've already done that. And that's just a little less than 5% of the courses that were scheduled. Another way to look at it is that we have 40 departments across the campus. That means we're cutting an average of 2 courses per department. And that isn't obviously going to hold for all departments, but that's the average. Another way to look at it is that these cuts will probably save us something like $500,000. And I'll go into that a little more. So as I said, this was done in careful consultation with the deans and the chairs. It was done in a way that 60% of the sections cut are sections of multi-sectioned courses. That is, because that was cut doesn't mean you can't take that course. There may be 7 or 8 or 2 or 3 other sections of the same course available in the fall. So you just have to move into a different one. We were very careful, chairs were very careful to raise capacities in the other sections as they canceled a section to make sure that there were no reductions in the number of seats available to students. So if they were canceling one section that had 30 people in it, they added 30 seats to the other sections so that they would have the same overall capacity for that course. Where there were whole courses, unique courses, canceled 35 unique courses, probably about 40% of the 86. Those were chosen by the chairs, chosen by the deans as the classes that would least impact students trying to stay on track towards their degrees. So this was not a mindless process. It was not an administrative-driven process, except if you count the chairs and as administrators. They're also faculty very concerned for the success of their departments. So again, just to repeat the promise, we will not be making further cuts at this point. All right, now who got cut? Let's turn to that question. Obviously, the way we go about trying to reduce the number of sections involves reducing the number of faculty in the classroom. Nobody is getting cut who has a continuing contract with the university. No one to whom the university has a contractual obligation beyond a single semester is being cut. In other words, we're aiming at people who are, in some sense, casual employees, employees that we have when we need them. When there are sections, we turn to the cadre of associate lecturers and to some extent to the cadre of non-continuing lecturers. And so the reductions in sections are coming to heavily on the associate lecturers, and I wanted to just go into some of that as well. So I read a lot in the paper about our laying people off. I just can't resist making the distinction that I make when I talk to my own colleagues about this, and that is that you can't lay someone off that you don't have a contract with. So we're not laying off associate lecturers. We're non-reappointing them. We're saying we don't need you next semester. We may need you in 2 semesters. We may need you to teach something next year. We don't need you to teach something this coming semester. That's a non-reappointment. People who are non-reappointed are, if they're at the rank of lecturer or above, are guaranteed by the contract, the faculty collective bargaining agreement, that they will be notified that they're being non-reappointed. Those people either have been notified already or will be notified in the next day or so. They're really, at the lecturer rank, there are going to be 4 notifications to faculty at the rank of lecturer that they will not be teaching any courses next semester when they thought they might. They probably already know they're not, but they'll get formal notification that they're not. For associate lecturers, we are not required by the collective bargaining agreement to send out formal notification, but we have been telling those associate lecturers as they are assigned courses, either we need you for next semester or we don't. So I think pretty much everyone knows at this point whether they're going to be teaching anything next semester. Okay, so we put an example up here for the economics department. The main reason we decided to pick economics is because there was an article in the Herald very recently that said that economics was being threatened with losing 1/4 of the sections it normally gave by the next spring. And so we just wanted to tell a counter story to that. And the counter story is that if you go into Wiser, if you were to open Wiser and search for economics classes, you would find that it says there are 60 economics classes for fall 2017. You'd have to take away 6 of those immediately because they're independent studies and they don't count as classes exactly. And then you'd have to take away another 7 or so because those are either duplicates. There's an undergrad course listed and a grad course listed, but they're the same class, so they're listed twice. Or sometimes there's the online classes or the continuing ed classes from CAPS are listed there, and they're opportunities for students, but they're not part of the assigned number of classes that the department is given. So if you look at the number of courses the department has been given, assigned by the dean, in fall 15, they were targeted with 48 sections, and they ended up teaching 48 sections. In fall 16, they were given the opportunity to put in 51 sections. They ended up actually teaching 48. And the reason for that was that a couple were under-enrolled, and I think there was a faculty member who wasn't available, so they had to cancel a section. For fall 17, that's this coming semester, they were given the opportunity to teach 49 sections, and they've been reduced to 46 at this moment. So the reduction there is of 3 or 4 sections depending on where you start counting. They took 4 sections out of the schedule, but they had gone to 50 at one point, so it gets confusing. So for spring, when this department is supposed to be down 1/4 of its sections, they've had been allowed to schedule 44 for the last 2 springs, and they're allowed to schedule 44 for next spring. So there's no further reduction anticipated for next spring. The basic message we're trying to get across here is that but just because you read it in the paper doesn't mean you should take it as gospel truth. We have reduced much less, and we plan no further reductions at this point. Okay. So at the end of the whole thing, I'll be happy to answer questions if people have them.
So for the final section of the presentation, we're going to talk about 3 areas of some next steps. So for the first one thing that's on the table right now is a proposed voluntary separation program, and I'm going to turn the microphone over to Marie Bowen, our Vice Chancellor, Assistant Vice Chancellor for Human Resources, to talk a little bit about that.
Thank you. It really will be a little bit because it's just a proposal, and I want to emphasize the word proposed. The reason that it leads the slide up there is because we just started talking to the unions about this literally within the last 24 to 48 hours. So please don't line up outside their offices asking for further information, or they will run me out of town on a rail, because they were gracious enough to agree that we could let everybody know that this was under discussion in the interest of being transparent about that fact, because I know that the fact that planning around things like that is going on is important to people's decision-making. So we wanted to let everybody know that those discussions have begun, but they've really just begun. And so I just want to provide a really basic sort of summary of what we have begun to talk about. This is by no means a done deal, nor is it necessarily where we're going to come out at the end. We have to negotiate this with the union. So with that said, what we're proposing is not a state retirement board early retirement arrangement that I think a lot of people are familiar with, where you have years added to your age or years added to your creditable service to affect your retirement benefit on an ongoing basis. This is more like things that we've seen done here for faculty last spring, and that the state did for a lot of its employees in the executive areas at the beginning of the calendar year, which is a cash incentive that would be available to the group that we end up defining if we do go forward. And the way it's framed in the initial proposal from us, which again I want to emphasize is not the final, and you know, we do have to bargain this, but what we have proposed as a starting point for the discussions with the unions is a $20,000 payment to those who have at least 10 years of creditable service, either with UMass or with other agencies or departments within the Commonwealth. And for those who have less than 10 years of creditable service, it would be a much smaller incentive of $5,000. Again, just a proposal, but I did want everybody to know that we were talking about that, because I do want everyone to understand that we are doing a lot of work behind the scenes to try and minimize the impact of what we're going to have to do to balance the budget on our faculty, on our staff, on our community as a whole, and that we want to try and do it in as collaborative and as voluntary a way as we possibly can. So now you know what I know, and we will definitely keep you posted as things progress. And I'll happy to answer questions at the end as well if anyone has any. Thank you.
So two other areas we're going to be looking at is, one, it's important to note that the way out of the current financial situation for the university is not by budget reductions alone. Part of it's by revenue growth, and really looking at what are some of the different ways we can continue. We've grown revenue over the past several years. How can we continue that? So of particular focus over the next few months is going to be scalable revenue growth. So we really want to start spending some time focusing on those things that can be brought to scale, because we could go off on a lot of different tangents and come up on a lot of projects that might create a little bit of revenue, but we want to really focus on some of those items that could be most scalable for the university. So two that I just will mention today is online education. We'll be working to really take a look at online education. As you know, UMass Lowell's about the same size as us, not too much bigger, and they do $35 million a year in online revenue. We do just under 20. So really thinking about how we might be able to look at that as part of our complement going forward, and then also taking a look at our graduate programs in terms of the profitability around graduate programs and what kind of revenue opportunities might be there with that part of the university as well. So we're going to be looking at revenue growth. Then the last thing that we'll be talking about for today is really continuing the fiscal 18 budget preparation review. And here, really being able to get information out to department chairs and deans and department heads in the college or the university to be able to make a budget that is more reflective of the university's operations. So we'll be putting out, there'll be more information for those folks who have been involved with the budget process probably within the next 2 weeks, where we'll be providing some budget templates to areas of the university so that you really can take a month or so to figure out what it is that you need your operations to reflect. Are there things that you've been arbitrarily cut in the past? Are there some things where you could make some cuts? There will be some guidelines on financial parameters, so it's not going to be like everything Christmas, everything, but within the financial parameters that might be available, what might your budget look like to really work with you? You're the experts on your areas, not me, not my staff, but what do you need? And to have those kinds of discussions. We will be looking at both the combination of the staff that are involved with the delivery of service in the different areas of the university, as well as the non-personnel. So this is an opportunity. What is it, if you look at your people and the non-personnel costs, what's needed to run programs, what's needed to run different areas of the university. So that's going to be up and coming. Then we'll be working to, really have some discussion with stakeholders so we can get the budget to be more transparent, to be more accountable, and to really begin to be able to have the budget be the foundation for which you all need to do your work here. That this isn't something that needs to be adversarial, that really, if we get the budget in place, then we're going to be in a good position to carry on the mission of the university and be able to know that the resources and that foundation is there to allow you to do all the hard work and the good work that goes on throughout the campus on an everyday basis. So I think that brings an end to our presentation. We have next step is available for comments and questions.
So I just want to make one more point, which is the solution out of our financial issues is not a one-year fix. And that's important for people to recognize. We didn't get into this issue in 1 year, and the expectation that we're actually going to be able to grow ourselves out of it, either through expenses or through revenue, is not going to happen in a year. We're going to have to make steady progress, don't get me wrong. But the expectation that we're going to turn the place around on a dime and there'll be positive margins next year, I think, is not realistic. We're going to have to work hard to do the best we can. We're going to have to work with the system. But this is a multi-year project that people are going to have to focus on hard and take seriously. But I don't want to build an expectation that there's some magic bullet out there or a series of magic bullets that tomorrow or next week or in 6 months, all of the solutions will be there and we'll find ourselves in a positive margin. It is fair to say we are still learning and listening and trying to figure this out. There's a lot of numbers up here, a lot of presentation, and it may sound like we're a lot further along than we are. But trust me, we really don't know all the solutions that we're going to have to implement and think about with you. And we are eager to hear from you about how you can help each other in creating opportunity either on the expense side or more importantly on the revenue side, because on the revenue side what that means is we're educating more people. That's the goal. And so we're looking for folks to really work with us. We are going to be much better off if the ideas come from you than if the ideas come from us. And so that's the goal. What do you want to talk about? I have all of these reinforcements if I don't know the answer. Or I may call on people. There are